Brad Pitt has spent decades living in a limelight that has obscured the reality of his closest connections. Beneath the popular roles, magazine covers, and public scandals, he carried a personal narrative that he had never ventured to share until now. In a rare instance of candor, Brad eventually acknowledged that one woman stood out among the others who influenced his life. We must go back to the humble beginnings of a young actor who never imagined love would hurt as much as it did in order to fully comprehend who she is. The creation of Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt was just William Bradley Pitt before he rose to fame as a Hollywood star. A young man from Shawn, Oklahoma, who grew up in a traditional Christian environment where modesty, hard labor, and discipline impacted every aspect of his early years. Brad was born on December 18, 1963, and grew up seeing his mother help challenging pupils as a school counselor and his father run a trucking company. His existence was peaceful, unremarkable, and far different from the glamour he would later experience. Brad found solace in the outdoors after the family relocated to Springfield, Missouri, which he subsequently referred to as Mark Twain Country and Jesse James Country. He excelled in debate, sports, and drama during his high school years. Early indications of the self-assurance and self-control that would thereafter characterize his professional life. He enrolled at the University of Missouri in 1982 with a journalism and advertising major. However, he soon developed a fascination with movies that he was unable to shake, despite his best efforts. With just 2 credits remaining to graduate, he took the startling choice that family. In 1986, resolved to pursue a dream that seemed unattainable, he packed his car and headed to Los Angeles. LA life was harsh. He delivered refrigerators, operated limousines, and even waited on street corners disguised as a gigantic chicken in order to make ends meet. He took acting lessons at night, gradually honing the art he thought would one day deliver him from the gnawing uncertainty of his formative years. His initial roles were unmemorable. Few people recall a few phrases from movies like bit parts and television series like Growing Pains. But despite the uncertainty that hung over every choice, Brad persisted. Then everything changed in 1991. He was a struggling unknown before making a brief appearance in Thelma and Louise as the smooth-talking drifter J.D. The latest fascination in Hollywood. He rose to fame overnight. Brad would discover, however, that celebrity did not make love any simpler. It made things more complicated, if anything. His first sweetheart that left his imprint was Juliette Lewis. Brad Pitt was still a long way from being the star the world would come to idolize when he first met Juliette Lewis in 1989. On the set of Too Young to Die, 2 young actors eager for a break were forced together. However, what started out as a business partnership swiftly evolved into something more intense, unfiltered, impetuous, and agonizingly real. Juliette was just 17. Brad is in his mid-20s already. However, their bond was instantaneous, explosive, and unavoidable. In a time characterized by revolt, grunge, and the 2 of them were a perfect fit for the restless pulse of the early 1990s because of their emotional recklessness. They couldn't be separated. They had a youthful energy that made everything seem bigger than life, and they lived and worked together. Later, when they co-starred in their off-screen relationship permeated every scene in California in 1993, giving their performances a level of concentration that viewers could sense. But chaos lurked underneath the passion. 2 young adults negotiating early adulthood's bewilderment, pressure, and celebrity. Juliette was dealing with personal struggles, substance abuse, and the pressure of unexpected fame as Brad's career was taking off. Once in alignment, their universes started to drift apart. Brad would confess to Vanity Fair years later. "I'm still in love with her. That person is a true genius. One of the best partnerships I've ever had was that one." Those remarks demonstrate how profoundly Juliette influenced him, even decades after their split. She was a reminder of a period when expectations, scandals, and fame hardened him. When he was still developing as a person, she was the one he loved. However, Juliette also bore the wounds of their romance. She implied in subsequent interviews that during their years together, Brad might have been conceited, consumed by his own goals, and struggling with inner demons. Their split was not amicable. Distance, miscommunication, and the pressure of everyone suddenly observing Brad more than he desired were all part of it. He never discounted the years he spent with her, even if they didn't keep in touch. Juliette Lewis was more than just a chapter in Brad's life. She was where it all started. Even now, when he hears her name, it's the first time he really gets what it meant losing a loved one. He was prepared to start a life with Gwyneth Paltrow. If Brad Pitt originally fell in love with Juliette Lewis, then Gwyneth Paltrow was the catalyst for his faith in the future. When they first connected on the C7N set in 1994, Brad was already a budding celebrity, and Gwyneth was the next big thing in Hollywood. Even the cast and crew were whispering about their instantaneous and overwhelming chemistry long before the cameras stopped rolling. Brad has never encountered anything like what he found in Gwyneth. Intelligence, sophistication, stability. And a companion whose goals aligned with his own. His own. He was unable to conceal her significance to him by 1996. Brad praised Gwyneth as his mentor while he accepted the Golden Globe for 12 Monkeys. Angel and My Life's Love. The collection wasn't designed with cameras in mind. He proposed that same year, carrying the truth with pride. Everyone in their immediate vicinity, particularly Gwyneth's father, thought the engagement was a logical next step. Bruce Paltrow, who loved Brad and thought he would be the best person to look after his daughter. However, the same qualities that attracted them also caused them to fall apart. Later on, Gwyneth acknowledged that she wasn't prepared for marriage. She was only 24. Striking a balance between expectations, fame, and a young career. She said she was too young, too unsure, and too overwhelmed to dedicate herself to such a large life. Conversely, Brad was positive. He cherished her dearly. And thought they were destined to endure. Hollywood was taken aback when they called off their engagement in June 1997, but Brad and Bruce Paltrow were the ones who were most distraught. Later on, Gwyneth would claim that her father was devastated by the split since he thought Brad was the one. And Brad continued to talk softly about her years later, saying to her in 2022, "It's lovely to have you as a friend now. The world has never ceased cheering for Jennifer Aniston." By the time when Brad Pitt first met Jennifer Aniston in 1998, she was America's favorite girl next door, and he was already one of Hollywood's most sought-after stars. Years before, their managers had introduced them as friends, but when the time finally came, their first actual date felt easy, cozy, and oddly unavoidable. They weren't two famous people acting in public. They were just Jen and Brad. Two individuals who found solace in each other's presence amid the turmoil of celebrity, smiled readily, and had a similar sense of humor. Hollywood referred to their July 29, 2000, marriage as the perfect union. With 50,000 flowers, candlelight music, and fireworks, their Malibu wedding came to represent everything everyone believed. For a while, Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston were the obvious couple. It seemed real. Together, they created Plan B Entertainment, seamlessly matched each other's energy, and went to award events hand in hand. Jen later affirmed that it was a genuine partnership built on mutual confidence rather than a vanity effort. However, pressure started to mount behind the public perfection. In addition to starting a film career and filming Friends, Jennifer was juggling ongoing concerns about childbirth. Brad was taking on challenging parts like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, following an artistic development he was unable to overlook. Though not simultaneously, they both want a family. Furthermore, uncooperative timing can strain love, especially intense love. They maintained that no one was at fault when they made their split public in January 2005. However, the world was unwilling to let their narrative end, particularly once Brad and Angelina Jolie's chemistry made headlines. Later on, Jennifer said that she saw pictures of Brad and Angelina in Kenya. It wasn't one of the highlights of her year, especially just weeks after their breakup. The public loved her even more because she handled the anguish with grace, even if she felt it personally. Nevertheless, Brad and Jen managed to re-establish their connection in spite of everything. In 2019, he went to celebrate her 50th birthday. Jen later remarked, "Brad and I are buddies," after their cordial reunion at the 2020 SAG Awards. There is absolutely nothing strange. They did not end their story in fire. It's transformed into a gentle, long-lasting substance. Angelina Jolie, the overly intense emotion. Brad Pitt was still married to Jennifer Aniston in 2003 when he arrived on the set of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Working with Angelina Jolie, who was unaware that his life was about to embark on its most tumultuous chapter, produced a synergy that neither of them had anticipated. After a few months of filming, Jolie subsequently acknowledged that she began to look forward to her job in an inexplicable way. Brad sensed it, too. An unanticipated collaboration, a bond forged during long days, dramatic sequences, and an adventurous spirit that drew them in. Brad and Jennifer made their breakup public in January 2005. Rumors were already spreading at that point. After adopting Zahara that summer, Jolie announced she was expecting Brad's child in early 2006. Their family expanded quickly. The twins, Knox and Vivian, followed by Maddox, Zahara, Shiloh, and Pax. The world referred to them as the ultimate power couple, or Brangelina. They are admired for their humanitarian efforts, large family, and beauty. On the exterior, it appeared flawless. On the inside, however, pressure was quietly increasing. Brad struggled with alcoholism, fatigue from his job, and the stress of having 6 children. Children who are always being watched by the media. Jolie battled past traumas, the tremendous duties of parenthood, and her own physical and emotional well-being. They were two powerful forces working at opposite speeds to keep a family together that was greater than their capacity for mutual healing. On September 14, 2016, everything fell apart. While flying on a private aircraft. Although the specifics of what transpired are still up for debate, Angelina said Brad had been acting violently toward her, drinking, and cursing, while Brad denied physically harming the kids. Child Protective Services and the FBI carried out investigations and didn't pursue any charges, but the harm was irreversible. Jolie filed for divorce a few days later, claiming that the family's health was the reason. One of the most agonizing public breakups in Hollywood history ensued. Years of court cases, custody disputes, charges, and resentment that refused to diminish. Even after being officially proclaimed unmarried in 2019, their disagreements remained unresolved. It was not until December 2024 that their custody agreement was finalized. However, the conflict over their French winery is still going on. The love he never recovered from, the last confession. Brad Pitt eventually gave himself permission to talk openly about the women who influenced him after decades of quiet, unhappy marriages, agonizing scandals, and attempts to start over. He had experienced chaos, passion, certainty, and heartache. He had experienced romances that shaped whole Hollywood periods. However, he acknowledged that just one love remained with him in a way he couldn't completely shake when he thought back on everything, the celebrity, the errors, the times he couldn't rewind. He never disputed that Juliette Lewis roused something within of him, but it wasn't the wild, intoxicating beginning. It wasn't the public fairy tale with Gwyneth Paltrow, or the nearly marriage experience when timing betrayed what could have been a lifetime union. Jennifer Aniston, despite the world's continued belief that their relationship was ideal. Brad's confession was far more nuanced and relatable. He regarded Gwyneth Paltrow as the love that taught him the meaning of commitment, Juliette Lewis as the love that defined his youth, and Jennifer in private talks with those in his closest circle. The person he felt most secure around was Aniston. However, he shocked everyone by saying something when asked which love never really left him. "Losing her taught me everything, and there was only one person I wasn't prepared to lose." He was speaking of the person he referred to as the love of my life, Gwyneth Paltrow. In 1996, long before the industry turned him into a jaded version of himself, he was made public. She was the one in the relationship who had never been betrayed, accused, or resentful. The one that ended because young people don't usually comprehend the weight of eternity rather than because they failed. Brad acknowledged that he was unaware of what he had until it peacefully vanished without rage or malice. Gwyneth finally established a life away from him, got married twice, had a child, and shifted her focus to wellness and entrepreneurship. They were just two young people too young to carry anything so big. Brad appreciated, even admired, her journey. However, her spot in his heart was still marked in a silent, permanent manner. Even for someone as well-known as Brad Pitt, love creates scars that time cannot remove. His admission, following decades of silence, serves as a reminder that the heart remembers its